All right. Hello everyone, welcome. We're going to be starting our tour of the Ashley Schiff Preserve. This is Stephanie.
Dr. Pochron.
Maureen Murphy.
All right, and let's get started.
All right, so before we enter the Schiff Woods, I kind of want to give you a little bit of the history of it, because the history of this is really pretty cool. So one of the first hires that Stony Brook made when it was a brand new school was a professor named Ashley Schiff, and he taught political science, and he taught in the 1960s, in the early 1960s, and he had this reputation for listening to students. And you're like, oh well, listening, Michelin, we can all do that. But he's working here at a time at Stony Brook University, where the university is a reflection of what was going on in the United States. It was really angry. So if you look around the campus right now, it's so beautiful and all green. But in the 1960s, they were putting up bulldozers in the center of campus and building buildings. There were mud holes and fallen trees, and they're great. If you look in the yearbooks, like from the 1960s, the photographers were clearly passive aggressive because they're only taking pictures of the mud. And so in the yearbooks, they're just like big tracks of mud. Their professors are getting muddy, the students are getting muddy. And to add to sort of that feeling of the political unrest, 20 students were arrested in the early 1960s, all in one day for a drug bust.
Wow.
All right, so can you imagine if 20 students got arrested today? There would be mayhem. There was mayhem then too. So Ashley Schiff, he was, all of these dorms used to have, they had sort of a British system where there'd be one professor, one faculty member who would sort of be like the leader of the dorm. And Ashley Schiff was the leader of Cardozo Hall, which is still over there. And most of the dorms had a culture. And they would pick out what their culture was going to be with the freshmen, incoming freshmen. And it would be things like, okay, we have the funky monkey dance. I just made up the funky monkey. But they did have particular dance moves that would be, we do the Friday night kegger. So Ashley Schiff's deal was, he was going to take the students to Manhattan, to DC for field trips. He was going to bring in important political leaders to be speakers. And so he took the job seriously at a time when everybody else was like angry and drunk. So then Ashley Schiff dies, like surprising everybody. He was sick like on Monday and dead like on Friday. And I think it probably, like the students were so angry. They were upset. He was the guy who, if you wanted to have an intellectual conversation, he was the guy you went into the office to talk about it. He was the guy who went, and with his own money and time, he went and bought a whole bunch of rhododendrons and azaleas and planted them underneath what's Psych A, and then over by Cardozo Hall and by Roth Pond with his own money, because he was like, okay, here's the problem. This place looks like a mud pit. Let's fix it. And so when he died, the students were really, really angry. And the president at the time, President Toll, he's like, what can we do? Because he really didn't want to riot. And maybe he really liked Ashley Schiff. Maybe I'm being cynical, I don't know. But he's like, what can we do? We'll name a building after him. And the students were like, no building. We want a forest. And they pointed to this forest and they said, we want this forever wild. We want this forever wild because Dr. Schiff had taken the students on walks through the forest. Instead of holding class, he'd be like, okay, screw the classroom, let's go for a walk. And he would take them on rambles through the forest. And so President Toll told the students that this was going to be forever wild in Ashley Schiff's name. So if we talk about how come this particular forest is important, one reason it's important is because the upper administration made a promise to students that this was going to be a gift for them forever. And so sometimes we get students coming in here from Brooklyn. They've never been into a forest. But I have given guided tours where the first time a student saw a deer was in this park. Or the first time they've been for a hike. And you can see it's going to be a short hike. It's just it's a small loop. It's only 22 acres. But then these students go on and they go to Wildwood and, you know, to other of the bigger local parks. So that's where we're going to start. Okay, also with a warning, don't touch poison ivy. It's baby right now, so it's little tiny, and I'll point it out when you see it, but if you don't know what a plant is, or if you don't know if it's poison ivy, don't touch it, I'll tell you. All right. That is poison ivy. Don't touch it. It doesn't look like this all year round, so like don't think like you're going to memorize it and then know what it looks like in July, because that won't be true. This right here is garlic mustard. It's a terrible plant. It's not native, and in some places it's invasive. Also a non-native plant. This is wineberry. Unlike the garlic mustard, which is just a pain in the butt, this actually makes fruit that's like raspberries, and it's really quite delicious.
You can go first.
You have to on it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, got it.
So, even though if you look around you can see all the cars and stuff and you know you're 10 feet away from a dorm, if you look across the field right here, what you're looking at is actually pretty stunning. From all of these plants right here, these are called maple leaf viburnum, and they're called maple leaf because it's of the shape of the leaf. They look like maple leaves. So maple leaf viburnum are actually under attack across North America. And you can see it's the full understory here. Like, we could go through and look at each plant and we would find that this is going to be 80% maple leaf viburnum. And there's a particular beetle that likes to kill them. And we don't have the beetle here. So we have, what you're seeing right here is really pretty stunning example of an untouched forest. Now, like I was telling you before Maureen got here, we're missing the chestnut trees, big chestnut trees. But this is what the forest would have looked like if we went back in time to when Ashley Schiff was here, for when Ashley Schiff's great-grandparents were born. It would have looked a lot like this. Like the composition of the understory and the overstory would have been really similar to this. So if you look out, you can see sort of a medium height plant right there. Is that the tree with all the flowers on it. That is called a dogwood tree, an American dogwood. And again, it's pretty stunning because in the 1950s, a blight went through and killed all of the dogwoods. And so the dogwoods that you see, well, we like to plant them. So, you know, I was complaining about planting non-natives. American dogwoods are native here, and people do like to plant them. But no one planted that one. That one planted itself. And so that one is a survivor of whatever blight went through and killed dogwoods. The other interesting thing about dogwoods is they only live about 100 years. So, you know, that one's pretty old. So one of the rarer plants that we have that grow in this forest include the sweet birch trees. And I am not a tree specialist. I like small weedy things. And we have some really good naturalists who are friends of Ashley Schiff, who are on our board, including Sue Avery, and she would just be rolling her eyes at me kindly, but she would be rolling. She's like, Sharon, you know what that is. But I'm just going to show you how to use iNaturalist. So I've launched iNaturalist. I'm going to take a picture of it. I'm going to say use the photo. And then I'm going to say, what did you see? I'm pretty sure it's an American beech. Say I even got that wrong. Okay, so tree specialist is not for me. So it says it's an American beech. I always get beech and birch mixed up anyway. But it's a native. So and this is one that people like to plant. So you can see these planted on campus. There's one over by the Starbucks.
Oh.
So also among the understory here are things that look like this. And there are a suite of them, and they are various flavors of blueberry. So we have Blue Ridge blueberry, low bush blueberry, high bush blueberry. Don't ask me to I'm not sure which blueberry that is, but that is a blueberry. And so you can see, and those maple leaf viburnums will all get berries in the fall. So these will come early, late summer. Those will come late summer, early fall. And all the birds and the deer like to eat them. I saw a recipe for the viburnum. I have to tell you, they don't taste very good. I didn't try cooking them, but I know that the reason that I know how rare the maple leaf viburnum are is because somebody reached out to me from a seed repository in Staten Island, and they're like, so your population is big, and this is a rare plant. Can you collect some seeds? So seeds from Ashley Schiff are, in fact, stored in Staten Island for other replanting efforts. So, right here you can see ferns growing here. Now, these ferns are native, and you can actually tell something about soil, what kind of soil you have based on the fern distribution, because they like it a little damper. And Long Island's soil doesn't like to hold a lot of water. So right over here, for whatever reasons, I suspect maybe there's a little more clay in this soil. This place right here likes to hold the ferns. We have cinnamon ferns, hay-scented ferns, and sensitive ferns, and New York ferns. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend I know which ones. I know sensitive ferns. It's so funny. When I became president of Ashley Schiff, everybody wanted to go on a walk with the president, and I am not a naturalist. But I had to become one really quickly. So what Maureen's doing here, I did with the previous president, and and with Sue Avery. So please, it's not their fault. I'm a dork and don't know everything. But what I learned was from them. So you can see this is going to become the flower, which is then going to become the fruit right here. And these are going to be sort of intricate white, I think they're called cluster flowers on this one. Some of you, if you've looked online and you want to see chicken of the woods, there have been stunning pictures of chicken of the woods, which is this mangled mushroom fungus that's on here. This is what it looks like after it's been dead for a while. It used to be this big, glorious orange shelf. And apparently, it's really good if you saute it with garlic and oil. Again, I haven't tried it. I would try that one though. Okay, so one of the other plants that we have that are native and a little rare here are cherries. And this is a cherry tree.
Wow. When do they become cherries?
Yeah, so they have to flower, and then the flowers have to get pollinated. And I am not a botanist enough to know if it has already flowered or not. I don't see any. It may have already flowered. Yeah, sorry.
Completely understandable.
I have to tell you, my training is in ecology, but not plant ecology. I actually studied wild baboons in Tanzania.
Oh, wow.
So, if you want to know about those cherry trees and the flowers and how cherry trees have sex and then make fruit, Jessica Gervich teaches a really good class on that topic. She's in ecology and evolution. I highly recommend it. I wish I'd taken it. Okay, so that also is a native. That's a red maple. It's a baby making its way in the world. All right, so I want to point out something. Maybe you could turn the camera back and down that path. So, if you guys have spent any time on Long Island, or if any of your listeners have spent any time on Long Island, it's kind of famous for being flat. And yet, as we've walked up and down, like hills, what's going on? Well, it turns out that that all of Long Island was formed 20,000 years ago by glaciers. And so what you're seeing here, this is the remnants of the glacier leaving 20,000 years ago and leaving hills. And not only that, all of the rocks and stuff here, this is all leftover glacial till.
Wow.
So if you look at the soil, so this is actually, I can tell you more about soil and worms than trees. If you look at the soil, I know it's kind of wet, but it's also, because it's been raining, it's pretty sandy. And that is one of the hallmarks of the glacier leaving. So the glaciers leave, crushes the rocks up into itty bitty rock parts called sand. Some are bigger. And like the big rocks that people paint with sorority and fraternity names, those are called glacial erratics. And they're just left over by the big old piece of ice mowing everything down, moving north and dying. And this sand turns out to be really important. If you look at this forest right here, it's pretty temperate. It's not particularly fire adapted or dry adapted. And that's because the soil here, even though I've just described it as sandy, so I'm from Illinois, so it looks really sandy to me. But if we go a little farther east and we go into the Pine Barrens, the soil gets really sandy. And even this soil here is going to be pretty acidic. And this soil, what's going on in the soil really defines what you get growing here. All those blueberries, all the various kinds of blueberries, all of the tundra plants, like we'll see some wintergreen, those are all available only because the glacier was here. Those are, this soil is sandy and acidic. Blueberries can only grow in sandy acidic. Azaleas, rhododendrons only grow in sandy acidic. You can tell it isn't as sandy and acidic as it will get on Long Island, because if you look, there aren't a lot of pines. If you go out east, it gets pinier and pinier, and you can tell that it's piney because of all the place names. Pine Avenue Park, Pine Avenue, Pine Boulevard, Pinehurst. All of those pine names are because you look around and you see all sorts of pine trees, and you get those pines because they're fire adapted and they're evolved to match the sand and the acid. This soil is also why we've set large swaths of the eastern end of Long Island aside. Because if we were going to dig straight down here, we would find huge repositories of water. We would find aquifers. And the aquifers, there are, if I think for all of Long Island, I think there are 3 major aquifers. And they're protected by the soil above them, but sand makes a really crappy protector. And that means that if I'm driving cars here, if I'm building some sort of plant here, I don't mean this kind of plant, I mean like, an airplane or car manufacturing plant, all that pollution that I dump in the soil, the sand can't hold it. It goes straight down. And so if it goes straight down, it goes into our aquifers. Now, our aquifers are 20,000-year-old, super clean, super nice water. So we don't want, Democrats and Republicans love to fight about everything, but everybody can agree that clean water is important, right? And there's no amount of money that can replace an aquifer. And so on the eastern end of Long Island, because of the glaciers, and because of the sand and the aquifers, we've set aside large swaths so that they don't get developed. In fact, I don't know if the Pine Barrens Commission was in the news today because they are doing controlled burns, and they named 3 sites out east, like in Rocky Point. I can't remember what the other 2 were, but those controlled burns are to keep the forest under control. Because if you look at the forest floor here, you can see a lot of dead wood, you can see a lot of leaves. Now, if you think about what that would be like if you go out east with the pine tree litter, it really wants to catch on fire, right? And this soil doesn't hold water, so that means those leaves, not today, but on other days, those leaves are pretty dry. And so if you have a dry year, by the end of July, it's a tinderbox. So doing those controlled burns out east in these forests, really good idea. All right, so I have to admit, when I walk through these forests and I start thinking about what formed them, you really get a sense of deep time, because the shape of the floor is dictated by glaciers that were here 20,000 years ago. The soil type is dictated by glaciers that were here 20,000 years ago. I have a colleague in SOMAS who likes to say that George Washington rode his horse through here. So there's even sort of shallow time, but important American history time. And then as you're walking through and you look at all the native plants and so many, I'm not seeing any garlic mustard. I'm not seeing any wineberry. It makes me happy. It gives you this feeling, like you can feel time and the unimportance of it when you're walking through here. More evidence of glaciers. Okay, so this big old tree here, this glorious tree, is a tulip tree. And when she drops her leaves, you can see that they're tulip shaped, but she's holding them all right now. One thing you can do, so it's hard to see what it looks like there up on top, but if you sit here and you let your eye pick out the pattern of the bark of this tree, and you look around for her relatives, you can actually see that there are a lot of trees who look like this just based on their trunks. So she's the mother of a whole bunch of these trees. They're skinny and small, but they'll be making their way. Okay, and then if you want to look down, there are some really interesting things that are going on the ground. Maybe. Probably because the camera's on, I'm not going to find them. Here's our friend, the earthworm. Now, interesting fun fact, any place that used to be under a glacier, like all of Long Island, has no native earthworm species.
Wow.
These are all from someplace else. So most people who find worms here, they're looking at various sorts of worms brought over from Europe. And it's not like worms travel far, but people do like to move their dirt. So you can imagine what it would have looked like to be on a ship coming over, 200 years ago, 300 years ago from Europe. People would have been bringing their potatoes with them, which you want to store in dirt. Their bulbs with them, which you're going to store in dirt. Ballast, which might have been, and I'm sorry, the real word is soil. So the first wave of most of the earthworms you would have been finding here would have been European worms. But there's something called the crazy Asian snake worm. And the crazy Asian snake worm, beside having the best worm name ever, is actually crazy. I can't speak to its Asianness, but is definitely a snake worm. So they might be two. I just did see two, but I don't. Okay, so if you come here at like the end of July, the crazy Asian snake worms are big, and when you pick them up, they do like the funky monkey. So those were brought over from someplace in Asia. It's a big place. I don't know.
Is that one, or is that just something else?
No, they're. I mean, it might be one, but they're too young for me to tell. Like, they really are noticeably big at the end of the summer. Okay, and for people who are taking those biology classes, and you have to do here's another worm, and you have to. So, fun fact: what's a worm's favorite food? Oh, this is probably a baby crazy Asian snake worm. Worm's favorite food is actually fungus. It sounded like a light up to a joke. What's a worm's favorite food? But it isn't. The answer is just fungus. So, like, as these leaves are decaying, they're pretty happy about that. And I was saying that if you want to... Oh, yeah, see, look, here's a juvenile. Another juvenile worm. My daughter used to want to call them wormlets. I don't... As far as I know, there is no special name for juvenile worms. You can tell what the adults are because they have a clitellum. This one's not. And the clitellum is... Oh, well... here you are. That... Oh, see, this one's too young too, sorry. But there will be a band somewhere, probably right here. It'll get big and fat, and that's where it holds, so they're hermaphrodites, so it holds their eggs and their sperm. Okay, so I was saying about the biology class, if you have to do the isopod lab, and you have to go catch your own isopods, here is an isopod. When I was a kid, we called them, oh gosh, roly-polies. Oh, sorry. It's
okay.
Like getting the hell out of here. So you can really spend a lot of time looking around this soil for interesting things. I've had students who are just specialized. They learn like from their grandparents what all the mushrooms and fungi were. And I think these are puppy cells, but don't necessarily quote me on that. All right. Oh, here's a fern I know. Yay. I'm always happy when I find one I do know. These are sensitive ferns. And they're called sensitive ferns because when the frost comes, they're the first ones to die back.
Oh.
They're sensitive to the cold. So, normally, what I do at this point is I have the students just walk around and enjoy and look and listen. And I urge you, as we go for the next few steps, that you do take the time to listen past the car noise, because you'll hear car noise. But if you pay attention, you're going to hear different birds. Today you're probably going to hear the sound of the water falling on the trees and the leaves. Sometimes you're going to hear noises and you're like, I don't know what that is. And you're going to say, hey, Dr. Pochron, what is that? I probably won't know either. But, you know, having curiosity is the first step to having knowledge. So, all right, so I'm going to be quiet as I take us up the next leg, and I'm just going to let you guys sort of appreciate it. Right here, this is where a male deer was rubbing his antlers.
Dr. Pochron?
Yeah.
So you know how like a lot of the branches around like Stony especially are very like twisty?
So that is a grape. That's probably a grape plant. There's some chance it's poison ivy, but it's not trying to kill anything, so it's probably grape. Yeah. What do you think, Maureen? Grape?
It's definitely a grapevine, yeah.
Yeah.
That's also invasive. Some of them are native, but generally they're invasive.
Cool.
And what happens is, as you can see, it snakes all the way up the tree here because it's trying to get to the light. And unfortunately, it'll take over, and its leaves are very broad, and it will eventually kill these trees because their leaves won't be able to get any more light. It actually strangles the tree. And you can see how it's weaving around.
It's interesting. So it's like the same kind of tree. The grape is also the twisty thing that's in the front, right? When we were just walking in, like.
The twisty one at the front is bittersweet.
Oh.
That's a different one. It doesn't make the grape like this one.
Okay. Thank you.
So, how do you feel about mixing it up a little bit? Maureen, do you want to lead the final leg?
No thanks. I'm still taking notes.
Okay. It's not a problem. I just didn't want to hog it. All right. So, just to give you an idea of where we are, that's Dana Hall right there. So that's part of SOMAS. So the police department's over there. So a lot of people use this woods to cut from. And if we keep going there, we're going to end over by Life Sciences.
Oh, okay.
So as we've been walking through here, maybe one of the things you noticed, I hope you noticed, or maybe you didn't notice, is that there's almost no litter. So there are two reasons for that. One is that a lot of people really love this woods, and they take a lot of ownership for it. So most people, when they're walking through, they pick up trash, just like, I don't know, whatever this is. The other thing is that the environmental club frequently comes through here and does walks and cleans up the, you know, whatever people accidentally leave behind. We also, at least one professor will bring his chainsaw through here when there are fallen logs. But also, that's John Shea. And the other, because you can see, like, this has been sawed a long time ago. But also we have our friend Mike, who helps us from groundskeeping and will saw logs if they fall in our way.
Wait, Dr. Pochron?
Yeah.
What's that like on the...
So that is called a gall. And what happened is something got in there and irritated the plant, the tree, and it responded by growing around whatever was irritating it.
Oh.
So there are people who would be able to look at that and tell you whether what bothered it was an insect or some sort of parasite, but also trees respond to cancer that way.
Oh.
And it doesn't bother them. They just grow around it. So sometimes, like, you can see knots like this higher up. So if it doesn't kill the tree, it'll probably just grow up, and someday that knot will be, yeah.
So trees can get cancer too?
Yeah.
Wow.
Doesn't kill them. But it looks like this when they do. They get a spot like that. So if you can talk Sue Avery into giving you guys a walk, she can tell you every tree. And she can tell you, she can look at, because, I mean, even I, who am dumb in the way of trees, can look at the bark of these and see that they're different. And she can look at them, and she can even tell the white oaks from the black oaks just from the bark. Which is really, it's a stunning skill. Of course, her degree is in botany, so that explains her skill with this. Also, we have other people, if you get a walk with Sue, not Sue, Lucy, she can identify all the birds by their sounds. So there's somebody chirping over there. And I could tell you what it was if I could see it, but she could tell you what it is by hearing it.
Wow.
Why don't you point out the Mount Laurel?
The mountain laurel, it's also native, and this one is very old, and there was another one over there, which was growing over the path that had to be cut back. But it's a gorgeous plant when it flowers in the spring.
Yeah, they're a glorious thing to see. This thing right here with all of its thorns right here, this is Smilex or cat's claws. And clearly you can tell how it got its common name.
And these are more sawed-off trees?
Well, probably what happened is they fell during a storm and then somebody moved them and cut them. Because Mike usually, what'll happen is if we were taking this walk and we had to climb over a log, I would email Mike and he would take care of it for us. So I'm looking for any wintergreen. Give a shout out if you see any. I'm sorry, I meant Maureen. Oh, she can't even hear us. If you see any wintergreen, oh, is that a dogwood flower?
This is just a dogwood,
Oh,
flower that you can see up close. And the ends of it is tipped in red. And then these are the seeds that if it remained on the tree, they would become bright red.
Wow. So beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
So I guess before we finish up, I would like to point out that the students use the Ashley Schiff Woods as a living laboratory. I forgot to point it out, but there are a couple of camera traps. They're not running right now. But we had students who maybe 5 years ago were collecting data on who used the trails. Were people using this park a lot? And the answer was yeah, people were using it a whole lot. And then they wanted to know, well, what animals were being caught in the camera trap. And so we found deer and raccoons and I can't remember if we found fox. Seems like we should find fox, but I don't remember fox being on that list. This year we have two groups of people who were looking at biodiversity, both in the park, comparing the biodiversity here and on campus and the number of invasive species both here and on campus. We've had students use this as a living laboratory, not just for science, but for art. We had one graduate student compose a classical, a suite of classical pieces based on the seasons in Ashley Schiff. And next year we have another graduate student artist who is doing an actual installation of life-size people. They're photographic cutouts of life-size people chopping down the trees and bulldozing to sort of scare people into appreciating what they have. So there's a lot of good things about this. You can come here to get out of your head. You can come here for a little bit of exercise. You can come do science here. You can come do art here. And I will also say this: if for those of you who are watching, you get a really different walk depending on who's leading. I come here as an ecosystems person, but we have a botanist who gives these walks. We have a birder who gives these walks. We have an environmental humanities guy who does these walks. And we all bring our own flavor in here. So if you thought this was interesting, try going with some of the other leaders and see what they bring to it. Right. Do you have any final words, Maureen?
No, thanks for joining us on a walk in the woods.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.